Zayin Amud Beis 7b. So let's bring up the page. Hold on a second. Let's just get some things in line here. Okay. So we finished off last week. Finished off last week with the story of Rabba and Rab Zera, who did a meal together. And Rabba shachat, he slaughtered Rab Zera. And then he prayed for him and he was resurrected. And the next year he said, let's do a meal together again. And he said, no, thank you. Not every year do we have a miracle. So we went through it kind of fast. We didn't go through all the commentaries, but we're going to move forward. In the discussion that we're getting to now is the discussion of continuing the discussion of the mitzvos of, hello, Josh, the mitzvos of Purim. So we're holding the meal. We're on Zayin Amud Beis in Perek Rishon. Amar Rava. Rava says as follows: Seudas Purim sha'achola b'layla lo yatzi dei chavosai. If a person eats the Seudah Purim at night, meaning night means the night of the Megillah, the night going into the 14th, if you're in anywhere outside, let's say, of the places that keep it on Shushan Purim, or the night of the 15th going into the 15th on Shushan Purim, if you keep it, let's say, in Yerushalayim. So you're not fulfilling your obligation of the Seudah. Okay? So you're not fulfilling your obligation of the Seudah. My timer. What's the reason? What's the reason that we say this is that you have to eat the meal by day? Again, I just want to point out that there are those who have the custom, of course, it's a big idea to eat a Seudah by night, but that's not the obligation. The obligation, Rava says, is by day. Because the Pasuk says in the Megillah that Purim should be, again, chapter 9, Yemei Mishta v'Simcha, days of feasting and gladness. And he uses the word Yemei as in day versus night. So therefore, we know that you have to eat the meal by day. Rav Ashi have a Yosef Kamei de Rav Kana. So the Gemara tells us a story that Rav Ashi was sitting, hey Avi, we're holding Zayin Amud Beis, we just started the new piece. So Rava says you have to eat the meal at night, and by day you have to eat the meal by day, by night doesn't count. So and the Ritva points out also you're not yotze to eat it Motzei Chag either. You have to literally eat it in between some sort of hours of the day. It means, i.e., before you have to make sure to wash before Shkia. That's why we're careful to wash before the end of the day, so you're at least eating part of your meal during the day of Purim. So Rav Ashi is sitting in front of Rav Kana. Nega v'loy osur rabbanan. It started to get dark, meaning on the day of Purim, it got dark, and the rabbis didn't come. Meaning the rabbis, the students of Rav Kana, didn't come to study by Rav Kana. Amalei, so Rav Ashi says to Rav Kaheshuk, we're in Zayin Amud Beis. Amalei, so Rav Ashi says to Rav Kahana, my time ulayos rabbanon. Why haven't the rabbis come yet to study Torah? So Rav Kahana responds, Dilma tridi b'sudas Purim. Maybe they're preoccupied in the Seudah Purim, so they're eating the Seudah, eating the meal of Purim, the feast of Purim, so therefore they can't come and study. Omer lei, so Rav Ashi says back to Rav Kana, had they weren't they able to eat it at night, why didn't they basically eat it the evening before? Seemingly that's the question, the evening before. And like this, they could come study Torah by day. Amar lei, so Rav Kana responds back to Rav Ashi, Lo shmiya lei lemar had amar Rava. Has the master not heard what Rava said? Rava said, meaning, like we just learned, that you have to eat the meal. If you eat the meal at night, you're not fulfilling your obligation of Seudas Yom Tov, of the Seudah Purim. Therefore, the rabbis had to eat it by day, and they're eating it by day, and their meal kind of is extending. Therefore, they have not come to this to study by Rav Kana. Amar lei, so evidently there's different versions here. He says Amar lei, Amar Rava Hachi. He says this. Did Rava really say this? That you have to eat the meal by day, like it says to support the pasuk is Yimei Mishta v'Simcha because there's days. Amar le'in, yes, he did say that. Tana minei arba'in zimnin. He studied it 40 times. Again, you have to remember this is Torah Sheba'al Peh, so he studied it 40 times. V'damalei command manach b'kisei until he said, so to say, it was placed in this purse, i.e., he owned the subject that you have to eat the meal by day versus by night, and it's not yotz if you eat it by night, and therefore the rabbis didn't come, and he studied it 40 times. Okay. So Rashi says as follows. Yes, Jonathan.
Yeah, what would be a reason, right, to not to have a Purim Seudah like you would do one and the other ordinary Yom Tov, where you have one at night and one, in the morning into the afternoon and everything? Okay, how can we have to just zoom, okay, and navigate right them to having the Seudah, all right, in the late afternoon?
Okay, so good point. I haven't seen it inside, but I've heard from many people that there's a big inyan to also there's a big idea to eat a meal also the night after the Megillah, to wash and make a Seudah. But that's not here. The Gemara is clear that the obligation of Simchas Purim that's together with the meal is based on the pasuk Yimei Mishta v'Simcha, days of feast and joy is obligation by day, and if you eat the meal at night, there's no idea to eat by night, but that's not fulfilling your obligation. It's not exactly like a regular Yom Tov where we have the obligation to eat the 3 Seudas of Shabbos or 2 Seudas of Yom Tov. Hey Aaron, but it's very focused that the main meal of Purim, according to Rava, based on the verse, is by day, not by night. So what happens is Rashi says, Naga v'lei osir rabbanan. We got evening and the rabbis didn't come to study Torah by Rav Kana. Ichra yom v'lei ba talmidim beis medrash. The Rashi says, what does it mean? That the students didn't come to the beis medrash, didn't come to study. And why? So Rav Kana says, maybe because they're preoccupied in their meal. I just want to say, there's a famous story, always a schus to have the honor to mention the holy Baal Shem Tov. I think it's brought down that the Baal Shem Tov's father was once sitting through this Purim, and somewhere or another, he realized in heaven there was about to be a kitrug. There was about to be voices of concern and adversaries saying that no one in the world was studying Torah. You have to remember then people didn't live in Australia and America that we know of. So kind of we're talking about between Eastern Europe and the Middle East. So there was no one learning Torah. Everyone was at the meal. And so the Baal Shem Tov's father, his name is Rabbi Eliezer, he stopped his meal or he finished his meal and he right away opened the Gemara. So there's an idea that you should be studying Torah. Like they didn't come to Rav Kana's beis medrash and he forgave them. He didn't hold it a grudge against them. Hold on, Jonathan. But nevertheless, there's a concept you have to learn Torah. It's brought down over here. The Magen Avram says that the Maril, which is the father of Ashkenazi Jewry, so of halacha. So the Maril says he didn't teach halachos he didn't give a class, I guess a shir, on Tainus Esther, the fast of Esther, because people were getting ready to buy things for Purim. In general, we have an attitude in halacha that, there's no point in stressing people out. So when you have days like Erev Rosh Hashanah, and Erev Yom Kippur, Erev Shabbos, and Erev Yom Tov, that there's leniencies when it comes. For instance, Erev Yom Kippur we daven fast shacharis. Why? Because if people have to get ready for Yom Tov, it's not always the time. People and the anxiety for people to be stuck in shul or to have obligations and then have to go shopping. So because people are buying for Purim, Maril will not give his class on Tainus Esther. And from here, it's brought down from the Gemara, it's mashma that in theory they would come to study by Rav Kana. Why? Rav Kana was waiting in the study hall. It means it wasn't like they closed the yeshiva on Purim. Rav Kana was waiting for the students to show, otherwise he wouldn't be in the beis medrash. Rashi says that they didn't come to his Seudah for Farbrengen, let's say. They came to Loi Ba'a Talmid beis medrash. The students didn't come to the beis medrash. It means he was waiting for them. But he was forgiving and he was understanding because, of course, there was issues of, people could have been stuck with their meal. Yes, Jonathan.
Yeah, I was saying right here, so right, I don't know if you were mentioning something right a minute ago, about gula beverage, right? And how and that's but I know I was just learning, right? That we didn't want to leave Mitzrayim, right? That we didn't want to leave any of the Galais. We didn't want to receive the Torah until from where we received the Kibla, right? But at the time when it was time to be redeemed, we were comfortable in our ways and everything, and we weren't so anxious, right? Like for instance, by Yetzias Mitzrayim, all right, only all right, many of us didn't want to go, so we didn't want to go.
Okay, that's talking about leaving Galus. Here we're talking about in the Yom Tov itself, the obligation is as of studying Torah. I mean, so the studying Torah was not so, Rav Kana wasn't expecting him. He was hoping maybe they would show on the base medrash. But yes, when we're in the middle of Yom Tov, that's leaving Galus is separate than on a Yom Tov to Yom Tov basis. Again, the Torah, the halacha understands when people are, let's say, concerned with getting their stuffs ready for Yom Tov. Okay, we finished this mission. Oh, Erev Yom Kippur as well. So let's continue to the next mission. Now we're going to have a series of short mishnahs in Talmud, means little pieces, that are going to discuss different comparisons between things, Shabbos and Yom Tov, other laws that are not really connected to, seemingly to, at least in a revealed way, to Purim. So start this mishnah. So it seems like we're getting to the end of the first chapter. So the Mishnah says like that, like this. Also, just a little connection. Jonathan's mentioning Kabbalah Torah. The idea that Rav Ashi studied this idea 40 times is connected to the 40 days that Moshe went up to the mountain. So the 40 times Moshe went up to the mountain, the first time to receive the Torah. So like that, Rav Ashi, which we know that Rav Ashi is pretty much the end of the Mesoros of Torah, according to the Rambam's Hagdama to Sefer Hayad, in the Rambam's Mishnah Torah, where he brings down from Moshe all the way down to Rav Ashi, which he closes up the Talmud. So he also studied seemingly a simple idea. It means you don't have to study 40 times to know that you have to eat the meal at day, or you must also eat a meal by day in order to fulfill your obligation. But nevertheless, he studied it 40 times and corresponding to the 40 days of Moshe received the Torah. So it brings down the Maratz Chayot. Okay. The Mishnah says like this: Ein ben Yom Tov l'Shabbos ela oichel nefesh b'vad. That there's no difference between, Ein means this, like there's no difference between Yom Tov and Shabbos, aside for the laws of what is permissible to do on Yom Tov with regard to cooking food. We know that we know this is coming up, this is appropriate now. We're coming up to both Shabbos and Yom Tov, right? We have Shabbos and Yom Tov coming together. So on Shabbos you can't cook, and on Yom Tov you're allowed to prepare, and we'll learn a little bit of the laws of what does this mean. The reason he says, the Reb Steinzat says, the reason why we're going into this Mishnah is because the previous Mishnah said there's no difference between Adar Rishon and Adar Sheni with regard to Purim, right? That we have in a leap year. We wanted to figure out how do we celebrate Purim in a leap year. So we have the first Adar and the second Adar. So continuing in that, we're going to continue with the laws of certain things that are comparable where there are differences. Rashi says, "Masnisin ein ben Yom Tov l'Shabbos liyis muter lechatchila b'Yom Tov, masha osir b'Shabbos." Things that are permissible on the holiday that are forbidden on Shabbos, meaning when it comes to cooking food. He says that Rashi right away tells us 1 second. What we're talking about over here is the permissible and the forbidden. We're not talking about that everything about Shabbos and Yom Tov are comparable, because there's other differences, like punishments. Like for instance, he says Shabbos is stoning and chorus and you get cut off, and Yom Tov is a lav. There is a prohibition, but it's not the severity of Shabbos. So we're not talking about everything exact, but we're talking about the halachos of what's allowed, what's not allowed. If you transgress a law, hold on, John, let me finish get a little further into Gemara. If there's no differences between the two, but as far as the performance of the mitzvah, so the mitzvah of Shabbos is you're not allowed to cook food. Yom Tov you're allowed to. Tosfos says like this: Ein ben Yom Tov l'Shabbos tzarich leimer dachi pirish ein shum melacha. So Tosfos follows with what Rashi is saying. What does it mean to say? Not that there's no differences, because again, there's many differences. But he means to say, Ein shum malacha asur l'Shabbos shloi tiheh asur l'Yom Tov. There are no works that you can do that are forbidden on Shabbos that is permissible, so to say, or is not forbidden on Yom Tov. Ela oichel nefesh b'vad, only with things with regard to food. As we're going to learn, what does that mean exactly with regard to food? But like Tosfos says, what Rashi says, but there are other differences. For instance, the punishments. Shabbos, you get stoned for violating the Shabbos, whereas the Yom Tov is not as severe. Let's see what Rabbi Steinzot says. In the Jerusalem Talmud, Rabbi Evan Yisrael, the question is raised, aren't there many additional differences between the festival of Shabbos, in other words, carrying out, as well as several rabbinic prohibitions? So here, the Yerushalmi goes a little deeper than our Gemara, the Jerusalem Talmud, about even prohibitions that are a little different. The Rambam in his commentary Mishnah, Tractate Beitza, points out that the Gemara already established that this Mishnah is according to Beis Shammai. Okay, there's an argument between Beis Shammai still within the laws of Shabbos and Yom Tov. So this Mishnah will go according to Beis Shammai with regard to preparing food for Yom Tov, and therefore is not in accordance with halacha. So, meaning to say, it is possible when Rebbe put together the Mishnah, he could have a stam Mishnah, because this is not a Mishnah that has a machlokes. There's no argument in the Mishnah. But this Mishnah is according to Beis Shammai, and we know that when there's a disagreement between the house of Shammai and the house of Hillel, the law is according to the house of Hillel, unless we know otherwise. There are cases where the law is according to the house of Shammai. So our Mishnah, if it's according to the house of Shammai, which the only difference is, that means Yom Tov is much more severe than the way Hillel looks at it, the house of Hillel, and the only difference would be with regard to food. So then this Mishnah would be according to the house of Shammai, even though it's not according to the law. You could ask the question, what's the point? Why would Rebbe make a Mishnah as a blank statement that's not according to the halacha? That's another question. However, the Rashba writes that the Mishnah can be explained even according to the Beis Hillel, the house of Hillel. Despite the formulation, the difference is only this Mishnah and those that follow do not presume to define all the differences between the entities being compared. Meaning to say, the Rashba says, one second, you don't have to get so... Again, we see Tosfos, Rashi, everyone, Rashba, the Rishalmi, everyone's trying to figure out, you make a blank statement. There's no difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov, only with regard to food. When we find there's other differences, so the Rashba answers it. And again, this is going to come up later in the Gemaras, in the next Mishnahs, that it's not saying only, it's just showing certain things of comparable. Rather, the comparison is concerning to a specific aspect. And the distinction cited in accordance to halacha. So in the halacha, there is a difference between Yom Tov and Shabbos with food. There are other differences, like the house of Hillel has other differences, but we're not talking about every single difference. The challenge in this explanation, and also even according to Rashi and Tosfos, is the word ein. The word ein is English. He translates the difference between festival Shabbos is only. But the word only is ein, which kind of makes it that's the only difference. Okay. Let's go to, he brings down, I think, the halach in the Shulchan Aruch. Reb Steinzas does. He says all labor prohibited on Shabbos is prohibited on the festival, on the Yom Tov, except for labor performed in the preparation of food. Again, in the preparation of food, we're going to learn it's not so simple. What does it mean? How far does the preparation of food go? Likewise, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda and Tractate Beitza, it is permitted to perform labor that facultates and the preparation of food. It means it's not just to be able to cook a scrambled egg. There are certain things that you need to be able to cook the scrambled egg, and those things are also usually permitted on Yom Tov in the event that you couldn't provide. Like it says, provided that it's not possible to attend to it prior to the festival. For instance, even in Mashal, when we talk about the laws of circumcision, right? So we know the law of circumcision, you circumcise on Shabbos, afilu b'Shabbos. So therefore, although the moihel is going to be doing things that are not permitted on Shabbos in a regular situation, but that's only for things that are a must, like cutting the child and addressing the wounds, etc. But bringing his little bag with his equipment, that he's not allowed to carry on Shabbos. Why? Because nothing stopped him, unless there was an emergency or something, nothing stopped him from carrying the bag on Friday and dropping it off in the shul or the place of the bris. Okay, some prohibit, same thing over here. When it comes to food, you're allowed to prepare food for things that you had to do today. The halacha, for instance, you have to understand something. The halacha of Yom Tov is, unlike conventional wisdom today, where people, maybe the meats were different, the situations were different, but today everyone's into aged meat. No one wants to eat a cow that was slaughtered today. Halacha doesn't recognize it that way. Halacha recognizes that a person wants to eat meat slaughtered today, not even meat slaughtered yesterday. And I don't think the only reason is because of refrigeration that we didn't have then. But it's the halacha is that meat slaughtered today is much better than the meat slaughtered yesterday. So therefore, you're allowed to slaughter on Yom Tov because it has to be slaughtered today. Aside from the fact that the sacrifice have to be slaughtered, but we're talking about even for a person to eat, you could slaughter on Yom Tov because it's nicer, it's tastier or fresher to eat meat that was slaughtered today. Okay, some prohibit even the preparation of food itself if the taste of the food is not diminished by preparation prior to the festival. So the Eli Rabbah brings down, it's not so simple. That even foods that you could prepare the day before, right? No one's going to cut a salad. Okay, that's not, you could do that on Shabbos, but no one's going to do certain things that you could, make a scrambled egg. You're not going to make a scrambled egg a day earlier, but there's certain foods that's okay to make it a day earlier. And this is the custom. So says the Eli Rabbah and the Pri Chadash. Nevertheless, if for some reason one failed to perform the labor prior to the festival, and he or she needs the food on the festival, whatever, mashahaya, you could have prepared it, but you didn't. So what do? And you want to have something that you could have prepared yesterday. The labor is permitted, but must be performed in a different manner with a shinui. Then typically performed, so says the Ramah, which is the halachic authority of the Ashkenazim. If he failed to prepare the food before the festival due to circumstances beyond his control, right? Whatever it was, the circumstances are basically you're kind of an oinus. He may prepare the food in the festival in typical manner. So says the Shulchan Aruch Rav and Shulchan Aruch Or HaChaim. Okay, so this is actually la halacha. So foods that you can prepare erev Yom Tov, you should not prepare on Yom Tov. Okay. Jonathan, I didn't forget about your question. I just want to get a little, because I'm going to have to end a little early today, so I want to get a little bit into the text. The Gemara says like this: from the fact that we say that there's no difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov, aside for food, but what about the machshirim, right? Getting to the preparing the food or the equipment needed to prepare the food. Is that everyone is equal? That's prohibited to do because you could have prepared the things before. Then it's forbidden even on the Yom Tov to make the machshirei oichel nefesh. Everyone knows, right? There's things that there's the food that has to be cooked, and there's the making it available that you could cook the food. That's the machshirei, the preparation of the food. Like he explains, sharpening the knife. Slaughtering knife for slaughtering, right? Let's say you want to slaughter an animal, so you could slaughter on Yom Tov, but the knife doesn't have to be slaughtered on the day of Yom Tov, and that's a malacha, sharpening a knife. So sharpening a knife, you could have sharpened the knife erev Yom Tov. Let's say this year on Thursday, put it on your hiding place, and you could examine it. It's all good. That's something else. But to actually sharpen it, have it all ready for the slaughtering. Why do you have to sharpen it on Yom Tov? So the Gemara says, Masnisin de like Rabbi Yehuda. Our Mishnah is not according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, the Tanya, because we've learned as follows: Ein ben Yom Tov l'Shabbos ela oichel nefesh. That the first there's a blanket statement that says that there's no difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov according to the rabbis, aside for only cooking food. Rabbi Yehuda mataf machshir oichel nefesh. Rabbi Yehuda says no, it doesn't have to be only food. Even things that are machshir, are preparing, let's say like sharpening the knife, can be done in Yom Tov also. The chatchila. My time, the Tanakhama, what's the reason of the rabbis of the Tanakhama, the first opinion? So they said, because we have a verse. The verse says, let me just read the full verse. The full verse says that the verse is says like this: Ach asher yoyachel l'chol nefesh. When it comes to Yom Tov, things that you have to eat, food, hu levad yas lechem, that you should do. The word hu is limiting, that only food you could do on Yom Tov. So the rabbis say hu v'lay machshirov, only food could be prepared, but not the equipment, so to say, the prep. The prep you could have done erev Yom Tov, do that erev Yom Tov. Rabbi Yehuda amar lechem, but the pasuk says hu levad yas lechem. Lechem is for whatever you need. Lechem is for you. So lechem lechotzer chayim, whatever you need. If you need to sharpen the knife, basically it's not. Rabbi Yehuda is not saying. See, you have to understand something. There's when it comes to milah, circumcision. So there's the famous question of doiche Shabbos, if it's hutar or if it is if it's hutra or if it's dachoy. If something becomes permissible or pushed aside. Meaning, when the Torah says, for instance, let's use an example of circumcision, that you could circumcise on Shabbos because you have to do it on Shmini Lamila, that the 8th day of Mila overrides the prohibitions of Shabbos, even though the actual act of circumcision is things that you're doing that would typically be considered a violation of the Shabbos. Why? So it pushes it away. The question is, does it push it away and make everything permissible, or the laws of Shabbos are still there? And every time you do something that you have to do for the circumcision, Shabbos, the law is making space for what you're doing. But if you could have done it before, then it's not been pushed away. So same thing would be, let's say, Yom Tov. If you look at the Torah saying that Yom Tov really has prohibitions, just like Shabbos, the Torah comes and says, that whatever you have with regard to food, you can do. So clearly, when it comes to Yom Tov, it's not a case of dachu. You're not pushing it aside. Hey, Ariel. It's that on Yom Tov, there is no prohibition when it comes to food. Everyone has agreed to that. The question is, what are the rabbis permitting? So the Rabbi Yehuda says they're permitting anything. The word says lachem. Anything food related, including sharpening your knife, is allowed on Shabbos. Jonathan mentioned the idea of carrying also some way or another related to things that you have to bring back and forth for making your food. So it's not it's not dachui. It's not even hutra. There is no prohibition on Yom Tov when it comes to food. So therefore Rabbi Yehuda says, of course, you could prepare the knife. The rabbis say it says only who. Who only means food itself, not the prep. Prep were not included in what the verse said is permissible on the Yom Tov. So Rabbi Yehuda says lachem, and he says too. There's two words in the verse. One looks at the verse that's including, and the other one is looking at the verse that's limiting. So the Gemara says 1 second. What about the rabbis? The verse does say lachem, anything you need for you, right? If I need to sharpen my knife, that should be included. So no, the rabbis say it doesn't mean that. It's not coming to say that anything around food. It's coming to say, who are you allowed to cook for? Lachem v'loy legoyim, lachem v'loy leklavim. You can't cook for Gentiles on Shabbos. You can't cook for animals on Shabbos. Only food for people. So again, it seems like the pasuk itself is creating what's called hutra or dachui, meaning to say that the Torah itself says really food is prohibited on Yom Tov, but we're carving out space for food. But at the end of the day, it's not a rabbinic. It's not like that. It's definitely not like a milah. It's definitely something. The Torah clearly says you're allowed to cook food, but nevertheless, the Torah says only you cook food for yourself, not for Gentiles. Incidentally, this is the reason why we don't have non-Jewish people at our table on Yom Tov. On Shabbos, it's okay to have Gentiles because you don't cook on Shabbos. So whatever you cooked was on Friday and you prepared it. If you're going to have five people at your table and one of them is a Gentile, so you're going to cook on Yom Tov 5 pieces of chicken instead of 4 pieces of chicken. So you have cooked for the Gentile. If you already cooked it and it's left over, there's a harama, a person said, well, I didn't cook and I didn't. But the halacha says you can't, on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to have, not supposed to really have a Gentile because you may end up cooking extra for them. And surely you can't cook for your animals on Yom Tov. All right, so Reb Steinzas brings down, also I want to say that no one argues, Rabbi Yehuda agrees with this law. He just says that the word lachem teaches us 2 things. One thing, it teaches you allowed to cook everything, and also it teaches only whatever you're allowed to cook is only for you. But even preparation, even preparing the instruments, but also in the word lachem is only, whatever that is only for the Jewish people. It's prohibited to perform labor on the festivals, even labor performed in the preparation of food for the benefit of a Gentile. This is bringing down the Shulchan Aruch. One may not perform labor on the festival to prepare food for an animal. So he quotes the halacha, our piece of Talmud, Shulchan Aruch, Aruch Chaim 512, Law 1 and 3. And again, that's why the minig is not to have even guests at your table, because of the chash, you may end up cooking extra for them. Okay. Now back in Rabbi Yehuda, we have a limiting word, meaning who, only food-related items, not machshirov, not the utensils, like the sharpening of the knife, let's say. Chsiv hu v'chsiv lachem. Kan b'machshirim she'ef shel asayis me'erev Yom Tov, kan b'machshirim she'ef shel asayis me'erev Yom Tov. And here Rabbi Yehuda kind of gives in. He says, okay, 1 second, it all depends. It depends if you were able to prepare it before Yom Tov. Sharpening the knife, you could have prepared before Yom Tov. Let's say the knife gets damaged on Erev Yom Tov. So check your knife. your slaughtering knife we're talking about, and sharpen it, because you have to remember, slaughtering knife is not like a kitchen knife, right? So you're just cutting an onion. Slaughtering knife halachically is not allowed to have any pegamim. It can't have any dents in it. It's not halachically permissible to use it for a right. Daf yomi is holding chulin now. It's not permissible to use for slaughtering. So, but check it on Friday, or Erev Yom Tov. Let's say this year Thursday, and then sharpen it. It doesn't mean, it means in a case where it got damaged on Yom Tov. Anyone who's been to a slaughterhouse will see that the shochat doesn't just check it before he starts slaughtering animals. He checks it after each slaughter. It means it could be that something during the slaughtering of an animal, right? So you're cutting a neck of a cow. It's not so pashut. It could be damaged the knife. So therefore we check it every time. Let's say for whatever reason, in between slaughters, it got damaged. So you have to sharpen it now. You can't use it. And you can't say, I should have done it yesterday. I did do it yesterday. Whatever happened, it got damaged today. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, in that such a case, then Lachem says I could sharpen my knife on the Yom Tif itself, where the rabbis, the Tanna Kama seemingly would just be of the opinion that you're not. Okay. Okay, we're going to learn this Tosfos. This Tosfos brings us to the next Mishnah. We're going to learn the Tosfos that deals with the question about the question about things that you could have before Yom Tov. Again, halacha looks at foods a little different than we look at today. Animals is definitely not even a question. I think there's a lashon in the Shulchan Aruch that says you can't even compare meat slaughtered today as it was to eat it much better than meat that was slaughtered yesterday. So af machshirin she'efshar lasis me'erev Yom Tov. Mashma, from the fact that the Gemara says that only things that are even the preparation that you couldn't do erev Yom Tov is allowed to be done on Yom Tov according to Rabbi Yehuda. Mashma dilay pligi el machshirin v'chlal the gufa Michael shari lasis Yom Tov afagag de'efshar lasis me'erev Yom Tov. So Tosfos says, 1 second, why are we only talking about like utensils? What about food itself? Food that could have been cooked the day before. And there's no reason that you shouldn't cook it the day before. So should you have made it according to Tosfos? We went back before, we quoted the Eli Rab and the Pri Chadash and the Ramah that says la halacha, you shouldn't cook food on Yom Tov that you could cook before. But now Tosfos is discussing, right? Tosfos is before Rabbi Shtein does. The Tosfos is discussing this question. That what about food? Seemingly that food, even if it was able to be used, even if it was, if you could have cooked it before Yom Tov, it's still, you could cook it on Yom Tov. The fact that Rabbi Yehuda holds like that, and the rabbis don't argue on that, seems the rabbis themselves would agree to that. They're only arguing about the utensils, the things that the machshir, but not the food itself. Any food can be cooked on Yom Tov, even if for whatever reason you could have cooked it before Yom Tov. Imken kasha, but that doesn't. We have a challenge to that theory. Why? We have in the Gemara Hamatzniya, which is in the Gemara on Shabbos. It says hachoyl v'magabin v'machabitz v'aroida chalis tvash b'Shabbos chayv chatas hizid b'Yom Tov loika. That's our boim. Afagag da'ava oichel nefesh. The Gemara on Shabbos talks about different things: milking a cow, making cheeses, pulling off a chalis tvash is a honeycomb from its connected point. That it says that if you do it on Shabbos chayv chatas, if you did it on Shabbos, if you did it by mistake, you have to bring a sacrifice. If you did it mazed intentionally on Yom Tov, you get lashes. So what do we see? That this is food. Why can't I pull the food from the honeycomb from its location? If seemingly it's a violation of the Shabbos, but it's food related. So why can I do it? Food. Even though the rabbis argue on that statement, and they say, 1 second, these things like milking a cow and making the cheeses and pulling the honeycombs are not really violations of Shabbos, because that's not a malacha. So the only thing they're arguing about is the technicality of what you're doing. But had those things been a malacha, it would be prohibited to do it on Yom Tov, even though it's ochel nefesh. The only thing is, there's no reason you can't pull a honeycomb on erev Yom Tov. So what do we see? Nevertheless, the rabbis, what do we see? That you're not allowed to do it on Yom Tov, even because you could have done it on erev Yom Tov. And here we just said that from our Gemara, it seems that anything food related itself you could do it on Yom Tov, and everyone agrees. The chatchila. There's no even if you could have done it the day before, you could do it on Yom Tov. So what's the situation? So he says like this. So right now, Tosafos gives us the psak, and it's surely any food that miskalkel from the word kilkel that would get damaged or no longer be of good quality. If you did it yesterday, surely it's permissible to make it on the Yom Tov. Tosafos has an interesting wording. It doesn't say ochel nefesh efsher lasos me'atmal, food that you could have done yesterday. He says ochel nefesh the adif tafi kishu osim me'atmal. There's certain foods that are better to be made a day before. For whatever reason, there's certain foods that are better, more tasty. Each professional chef that's watching and joining our class has what I'm sure thinks of the foods that they know that they cook, that's better to cook earlier. But if there's food that are better to cook erev Yom Tov, like in matznia, I guess the cheeses and stuff maybe are better to be, obviously, it's too fresh, it's better for the cheese to sit a day or so. Asr lasses b'Yom Tov, I'm not sure why the honey has to be pulled the day before. So, the Shuki says lasagna. Lasagna is better the day before? Not sure that's Hakol Modim Bizet. All right. Shuki claims that lasagna is better yesterday. Yesterday's lasagna is better than today's. So mutter lasis b'yantif. Aval oicha nefesh the adir tafi kishu also miasmal gan hu dematzni os lasis b'yantif al machshin de lemis kalkel kishu nas miasmal b'hav vad yesh lechalik ben heicha de efshed la yefshed. So Tosfos says like this: foods that could be done that are only good fresh. Everyone agrees you could cook it on Yom Tov. Foods Tosfos says that are better a day before, and Shuki claims lasagna is better. You should do it the day before. But maybe because Shuki like cold lasagna. But machshirim, but things that are utensils that won't get delay miskalkul shnasim yasmal vadi yesh lachlik ben hechdav shlefshe. Then clearly with utensils and things, then it's a much more strict that you have to do it before Yom Tov and not on Yom Tov itself. Okay, let's do one more little bit of the Mishnah.
Rabbi, I have a super quick question, actually.
Well, before your question, I don't understand what you mean by lasagna.
Oh, there's a lot of foods that are in the dairy cream custard type of way. Like they need to sit and like set overnight, where like it's still very soft and palatable, but like in the morning when it's set, you reheat it, it has a much stronger consistency. Like if you made custard or ice cream or a very cheesy kugel or something like that, they tend to do better the next day, and they last better over time, is what I'm saying.
Okay, all right, I'll take care for you. You're a chef. Go ahead.
The question I have is super quick though. I'm curious about the differentiation they're making between like kalim and food, because like with kalim, would you be able to go as far as to say if a pot became unkosher in the morning that you could throw it into a fire until it gets red hot and prepare it, in the same way that they're arguing about whether or not you can sharpen a knife before you shecht an animal? Because like that's something where it's not something you would prepare ahead of time. It's like something happened in the moment. Would you be able to do something like that? Is that a violation of Yom Tov? Because it's in the preparation of food.
Okay, it depends. Okay, according to Tanakama, either way you can't do it. Any machshir of kalim you can't. You're asking only according to Rabbi Yehuda, who says that you're allowed to do machshirim. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's mashma that if you only had one pot, then there's no difference between making your knife kosher and making your pot kosher. I would assume you can, according to Rabbi Yehuda. I don't know if the halachos like Rabbi Yehuda, but according to the rabbis, you can anyways. Just like you can't fix your knife on your slaughtering knife. But even Yehuda agrees that things that were able to be done before Yom Tov should not be done on Yom Tov. The question is if you couldn't, like the knife got damaged on Yom Tov. When it comes to, it's not, according to Tosfos, to be quite honest with you, it's not. It doesn't seem like there's a major difference between the two, because he says two things: food that is damaged before Yom Tov, I mean, it can't hold the night. Then you can make it on Yom Tov. Food that's better, maybe that's why he uses the word better, to make it the day before, then you should make it the day before. But food, I guess, there's certain foods that are either not here, not there. Or maybe Tosfos, in his professional culinary opinion, it's either one. It's better or it's worse. There's no pariv. when it comes to food. Either it's fresh, wins the day, or like you said, it has to sit, wins the day. But then he finishes off, Av machshirin delay miskalkel, kishenasu mi esmol. We already just said that the same thing applies. Really, at the end of the day, he's saying the same thing applies to food. Food that can't be cooked yesterday should be cooked today. Things that get damaged, today could be fixed today, according to Rabbi Yehuda. It's not really so clear the differences between the two. He says over here. The Rambam writes, "The midrabanan osir lasos v'lochish hayefshal asoysim merav Yom Tov lo yahayi by hefsid lo yachasarn amnam b'kol by mashman the osim in Torah." The Rambam writes it's only rabbinic to do something you could have done yesterday, and you didn't, and therefore you're doing it today. But according to the Kol Boy, which is also a Rishon, he says that's also min Torah. That's something that food that could have been prepared yesterday should have been prepared yesterday. So it's not really literally. I mean that you have there's a lot of foods that are that today we're not. I don't see people really being that careful in that, like making sure to make food specific. I don't know. Maybe we're not so then it was more clear what foods are damaging and what foods are not. All right, let's or get damaged overnight. Let's just do a little bit because I have to end a little early today. I have to take my daughter. So it says like this: Ein ben Shabbos Yom Kippurim el shezeh daini b'dei adam zeh daini b'kares. Okay, now we're continuing in the path in the discussions of comparing things. So we compared the first two others. And now we could be compared holidays and Shabbos, and now we're comparing Shabbos and Yom Kippur. So we know Yom Kippur for sure you're not allowed to cook on Yom Tov. On Yom Kippur, there's no food. We don't eat food on Yom Kippur. The only difference is zez doini b'dei adam. In Shabbos, if you violate a prohibition on Shabbos, so you get punished by stoning, which is done by man, meaning by the Beis Din. V'zez doini in Yom Kippur, if you violate the Yom Kippur, then your punishment is kares, is to be disconnected, but it's not done by the Beis Din, it's done by God. So it's not misa b'dei shemaim, it's kares, which is more strict than misa b'dei shemaim. Okay, so masnisim b'dei adam yeshma misas Beis Din, meaning on Shabbos the death penalty is carried out by the Beis Din, where in Yom Kippur you're not allowed to do whatever you can do in Yom Kippur, you can't do on Shabbos. Although there is a case, I don't think Shukri remember in Rosh Hashanah we learned that that in the case that today it's not possible because we just don't have those. This calendar doesn't work like that. But I think there was something to the effect that you could soak vegetables, matzah Yom Kippur, in water to keep it fresh. Things that you wouldn't be able to do on Shabbos, like in a preparation from Yom Kippur going into Shabbos to protect there's a certain leniency in some sort of laws that are not midaraisa, they're shvus, that you could do. The rabbis have permitted you during Kippur. I think if I remember correctly, it was kind of a mix of people's anxiety because they're hungry with anxiety towards the end of the fast kind of thing, where they permitted the woman or so to soak the vegetables in water. That's one of the ways they would preserve the vegetables. Okay, hold on, Jonathan. Why don't you ask your question? Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yes, all right. Then why should one get kares, right, for eating on Yom Kippur? But if you're depriving your body and your body needs to eat and everything, all right, and sometimes, all right, it's a sakana, all right, for one not to eat. Sometimes one even needs to eat because of medical problems and purposes, right? So why should, like the verse says, so why should one get kares?
You don't get kares if the law says you're allowed to eat. You don't get kares. You only get kares when you're supposed to be fasting. But if the doctors forbid you to fast, then that's nothing. Then it's not. Then I think there's even a lashon. There's a mitzvah. There's even a halacha question if you make kiddush on Yom Kippur in the event that you have to eat. So I was once in Tzemach Tzedek shul, and there was I was trying to take a nap between mincha and. Between Musaf and Mincha, and someone was mamish eating loud a whole Seudah, and with a big smile because I guess it was his doctor said he had to eat. So then he did it, as a mitzvah. It's mitzvah Seudah Yom Tov. I think you make Kiddush. All right, guys, I have to leave early today.
Race.
What's that?
How come the Torah starts off right then as it declares that you have kares if you don't Yom Kippur? How come it starts off that way?
That's the prohibition. That Yom Kippur is very strict and it's punishable by kares. But if we're going to learn next week, we're going to follow up with this Emir Hashem, where it discusses the questions of how kares works. Kares is if you get malchus, does the malchus get rid of the kares? But with that, just straight up, if someone violates the Yom Kippur, knowledge and bezada and with all the information, with the warnings, then you get the kares. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining. For those who are not by tomorrow's class, I want to wish everyone a Chag Kosher v'Sameach, with Kabbalas Torah, Simcha b'Pnimius, and we'll see each other, Be'ezus Hashem, safely here in Eretz Yisrael after Shavuos for continue. Take care. Laila